Dare you.
All right, here we go. On to some Sunday Night Football now. Vikings in Dallas to face the Cowboys. Two teams having very similar seasons, almost mirror images of each other. Both have elite running backs. Both have elite wide receivers, maybe elite defenses, you could say. And both have quarterbacks with a plethora of questions surrounding them. Here's Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott ahead of Sunday's pivotal game.
We control our destiny, so every game is the biggest game to me. As I said, this is a good team. This is a good team, good defense, and if we dare to try to look past them, then we're making a mistake. So we've got to focus on this, focus on how talented they are, but know that we've got the tools. We've got to go out there and execute our game plan, and we'll be fine.
Cris, I'll start with you. I sat down and looked at both these games. I said, well, clearly the edge goes if you from top to bottom, they are very similar teams. So who does have the edge in this game?
Well, here's the thing. It's going to come down to the team that plays better situational football. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but we always refer to third down, the money down in the NFL, being able to sustain drives or being able to get off the field, red zone, of course, and then end of half, end of game scenarios. But what I want to focus on is what team has the ability to force the other team's quarterback to make mistakes. That's where this game will be won and lost. You talk about how evenly matched these two teams are. I mean, both teams have offenses and defenses inside the top 10 in NFL rankings as far as yards and points. So this is going to be almost like the Dallas Cowboys looking in the mirror at themselves. And so when I look at the Minnesota Vikings and the way that Kirk Cousins played, I feel a lot better about that as opposed to what I've seen from Dak Prescott. Coming off of the bye week against the New York Giants, I was underwhelmed by that Cowboys offense in the first half, save a couple of play-calling blunders by Pat Shurmur. The Dallas Cowboys are going to go into the half at a deficit against the New York Giants, who are a two-win club. So if you're a championship contending team, that's not the kind of performance that you would expect. That looked a lot different than what the Minnesota Vikings were coming off of. Even though they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs with no Pat Mahomes, they're playing against a solid club that will be in the postseason on the road in Arrowhead. So in looking at the two teams, I just feel like from a consistency standpoint, the Minnesota Vikings are more dependable than the Dallas Cowboys.
Well, you guys both nailed what is one of the most interesting parts about this game, which is the similarities between the teams. Last week, and Cowboy fans got all mad at me, but I think it's accurate, I said the Dallas Cowboys are the Minnesota Vikings with better PR. There are so many things that you go down the list and say, if this team had, either of them, a quarterback I loved, I would feel like they can win the Super Bowl. And our friend Skip, proof positive is our friend Skip Bayless loves Dak Prescott and thinks they can win the Super Bowl. For the vast majority of us, if we think the Cowboys have a hard ceiling of what they can achieve this year, it's not because you don't trust Zeke. It's not because you don't trust the defense. It might be a little bit because you don't trust the head coach, Jason Garrett, but really it's about the quarterback. How good can Dak Prescott be? But the reason I think the Cowboys are better positioned this week is not only because the game's in Dallas, but because I looked at the injury report and I said, oh, looks like everybody that matters is going to play. Now, I know Amari Cooper didn't practice, but the report is despite not practicing, he's going to play. And the Dallas Cowboys, when they have their full complement of weapons, are a really, really good football team. They are going to have their full complement of weapons. And one area where up to 3 weeks ago, I'd say, the Cowboys had been somewhat disappointing, creating pressure on the opposing quarterback. We did see, now it was against the Giants offensive line, I'll grant you that, but we saw what the addition of Michael Bennett can do for them, along with DeMarcus Lawrence rounding into the form that got him that massive contract this offseason, and then he had the shoulder surgery, which it felt like slowed him down early. And Robert Quinn, since he's been back after that 2-game suspension, he's been excellent for them. So now they have 3 viable pass rushers. Byron Jones, after a slower start to the year, is playing really well at the corner spot. So you've got a lot of reasons to me that the Cowboys should take care of business in this football game, and the opportunity for the Cowboys to finally beat a team we all consider a good team. Like, they have gotten fat on bad football teams. The only competent football team they've beaten is the Eagles, and I don't know if the Eagles are a good team. They've had 2 games, I should say, against really good teams. They lost both those games, and the other loss obviously coming against the Jets was just inexplicable. But I think the Cowboys should be in good position to get a victory this week.
Yeah, how important is it for this Cowboys team to go out and finally beat a good team? Maybe do something not just to show the league, but to separate themselves from the Eagles a little bit. and to show themselves, give themselves a little confidence moving forward?
Well, I think the last point you made is probably the most important. The Cowboys playing with a lot of confidence going down the stretch because the Eagles are going to be right there. The Eagles have shown throughout the course of this season in gotta-have-it situations, they're going to come up big with a win. They did it on the road in Green Bay in a short week. They did it against the Buffalo Bills in Orchard Park, which is a sneaky tough place to play. I mean, so the fact is that this Eagles team has been hanging around all year, and we know they have the talent. Now, they do have a date with the Eagles in Philly later on in the season, but I think it's important for this Cowboys team to be playing well when they go into that game. You want to start playing your best football around the end of November going into December. This is about the time that championship contending teams start to pick it up a little bit. Until this point in the season, the Dallas Cowboys have underachieved. We need to see more from this team if we're going to count them in the picture of contenders in the NFC.
But the concern for the Cowboys, particularly if they can't beat the Vikings at home, is they could be a better team the second half of the year than the first half and end the second half with a worse record than 5-3, because you were talking about the Raiders. It opens up for them greatly in the second half of the year. The opposite's the case for Dallas. Their next 7 weeks, tell me the worst team. So they got the Vikings, then they have the Lions, then they're in New England, then they have the Bills, who you were talking about, then they have the Bears, then they have the Rams, then they have Philly. We can say the Lions and the Bears aren't great football teams, but I don't think anyone has played either of those teams that year and looked at them the way you look at the Falcons this season, the way you look at the Jets this season, even though the Cowboys lost to the Jets. Those are all viable teams. Those teams run the gamut from mediocre to very good. After the first half of the year, you played a bunch of the dregs of the NFL. If you can't beat the Vikings when they are coming off what I would consider a tough loss for them, because not only did the Chiefs not have Dalvin Cook, but I'm sorry, did the Chiefs not have Patrick Mahomes, but Dalvin Cook did not get going for Minnesota. If you can't beat them in this spot when you're fully healthy, then you start looking at the schedule and saying, all right, can the Cowboys win the division any way other than by default? If they win this week, then it's like maybe they can go on a second-half surge the way they did last season. If not, then it's just a mediocre team in a mediocre division that's going to be fighting with another mediocre Philadelphia Eagles.
And the interesting part about this is which quarterback you trust more moving forward, because they do have such similarities. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But coming up, will Pat Mahomes return to his MVP form Sunday? That's next. This is First Things First.
I didn't mean to take the shot at the Falcons. I know we got a Falcons fan in the crowd.